The faceless mass's power is a ladder with 5 levels. Most people never climb past the first. The few who do, they rule the rest. Machiavelli understood this brutal truth centuries ago, and nothing has changed. The world disguises itself with talk of equality, fairness, and opportunity. But beneath the mask lies hierarchy, a hidden order. And whether you realize it or not, you are already on that ladder. The tragedy is simple. Most people never even know it exists. They spend their entire lives on the bottom rung, mistaking endurance for strength, obedience for morality, and survival for success. They are convinced the ladder cannot be climbed, or worse, that it doesn't matter. So they shuffle forward, faceless, anonymous, forgotten. But for those who dare to open their eyes, the ladder is real. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You must make a choice: stay where you are or begin to climb. The powerless majority. The bottom level is the faceless masses. These are the powerless, the countless millions who live and die without shaping a single event in history. They do not command armies, build companies, or influence the direction of nations. They work, they consume, they obey. Machiavelli would say they are useful only as a fog, the gray crowd that hides the figures above them. Replace one with another, and the machine continues without pause. They are the interchangeable parts of civilization. The powerless mistake routine for purpose. They confuse exhaustion with progress. They imagine morality without strength is virtue, when in reality it is just weakness dressed in costume. The illusion of freedom. The most dangerous prison is the one you cannot see. The powerless live inside it every day. They believe they are free because they can choose between 2 brands, 2 parties, 2 jobs. But every option was designed long before they arrived at the crossroads. Their choice is a performance. Their freedom is illusion. Ask one of them why they live as they do, and the answers are scripts handed down by the system. That's just how life works. I have responsibilities. Not everyone can win. But these are not truths. They are excuses whispered by chains, governed by fear. If you study the powerless long enough, you'll see their compass: fear. Not fear of death, but fear of rejection, risk, and responsibility. Fear of rejection makes them slaves to the crowd. They cannot think independently because they crave approval. Fear of risk makes them slaves to safety. They avoid failure, but also greatness. Fear of responsibility makes them slaves to authority. They wait for orders, decisions, and permission. This is why most men never rise. Climbing the ladder means shouldering the burden of command, but the powerless would rather be commanded than bear that weight. The idol of fairness. The masses worship fairness. They believe life owes them something. That virtue will be rewarded. That suffering earns respect. That obedience guarantees safety. But Machiavelli laughed at fairness. He knew the world is not ruled by justice, but by power. The powerless cling to fairness because it comforts them. It lets them believe the ladder doesn't exist, or that someday, without climbing, they will be lifted upward. But fairness has never raised anyone higher. Only ruthless will does. The fog of the crowd. The crowd resents ambition. When one of them begins to climb, the rest pull him down. They call him arrogant, selfish, dangerous. They glorify weakness because weakness mirrors themselves. They mock discipline because it reminds them of their own indulgence. History is littered with examples. Socrates forced to drink poison, innovators ridiculed, rebels crucified. The crowd punishes anyone who dares to see differently, because if one man rises, the rest must face their own chains. The awakening. And yet, there are moments when the fog cracks. A powerless man wakes up and sees the ladder for the first time. He realizes his exhaustion is not progress, his morality is not virtue, his obedience is not strength. He feels the sharp sting of awareness. This is the beginning of transformation, but awakening is not a gift, it is a burden. Once you see your chains, you can never unsee them. You must decide, remain comfortable in illusion or suffer the climb toward power. Most retreat. A few rise. The first step is not glorious. It is brutal. It means betraying the values of the powerless, rejecting comfort, rejecting fairness, rejecting the approval of the crowd. It means admitting the world does not care about your suffering, only your strength. This is why so few attempt it. To rise from the faceless masses is to be hated by them. To step onto the ladder is to become an enemy of those who refuse to climb. But Machiavelli would tell you, this hatred is proof you are rising. So now I ask you, where are you on the ladder? Are you faceless, living in chains you cannot see? Or have you felt the cracks, the suspicion that you were meant for more? If so, beware. The next level is seductive. It looks like power, feels like freedom, but in truth, it is still servitude in disguise. This is level 2, the enforcer. And that is where we climb next. The enforcer. When a man rises above the faceless masses, his first taste of power is intoxicating. For the first time, he commands rather than obeys. He enforces rather than submits. He is no longer fog. He has shape, force, presence. This is level 2, the enforcer. At this stage, a person believes he has broken free. But Machiavelli would smirk, because this level is not true power, it is borrowed, and borrowed power always comes with chains. The illusion of authority. The enforcer looks powerful because he stands above the powerless. Soldiers marching in unison look fierce. Police in uniform radiate authority. Middle managers bark orders at subordinates. But look deeper. Where does their power come from? Not from themselves. It is granted by someone above them, a prince, a CEO, a state. Without that higher authority, their power vanishes instantly. The enforcer is feared but not respected. He is obeyed but not trusted. People comply with his commands, but they know the commands are not his own. He is the mouthpiece of someone else's will. Fear without loyalty. Machiavelli warned rulers to avoid being hated, but enforcers often are, because unlike true leaders, they do not inspire loyalty, only compliance. The soldier at a checkpoint may control you today, but the moment his orders are gone, he is powerless. The supervisor may dominate the office, but remove his title, and his voice carries no weight. The online censor may silence opinions, but without the platform behind him, he is irrelevant. This is the curse of the enforcer. He mistakes fear for power, but his fear dissolves as soon as his badge, uniform, or title is stripped away. The comfort of borrowed power. Why do so many remain at this level? Because borrowed power feels safer than true power. To climb higher requires risk, responsibility, and independence. But at level 2, a man feels strong while still being protected. He doesn't have to think. His orders are given. He doesn't have to lead. He only has to enforce. And many mistake this for victory. They flex their temporary authority, cling to their uniforms, polish their titles, never realizing that without the system, they are nothing. Modern examples. Look around and you'll see enforcers everywhere. The manager who bullies employees but trembles before executives. The activist who silences dissent but is lost without the movement's slogans. The bureaucrat who enforces rules but has no power to write them. These people feel powerful because they can punish others. But Machiavelli would call them pawns with sharper teeth. They are still controlled, still replaceable, still bound by chains they cannot see. The trap of the enforcer. The danger of this level is that it feels final. Many enforcers believe they have climbed to the top, They mistake fear for respect, obedience for loyalty, and order for influence. But true power is not enforcing someone else's will. True power is bending others to yours. As long as you must be told what to do, you are not free. You are still a servant, only now you are a servant armed with authority. Machiavelli saw this clearly. He noted that mercenary generals often looked strong but collapsed under pressure because their loyalty was never to themselves. They were hired blades, not masters of their own destiny. The awakening of the enforcer. The few who rise beyond this stage eventually notice the cracks. They realize their orders are not their own. Their authority is fragile. Their power depends on someone else's throne. And then comes the question that divides pawns from players. What if I stopped enforcing and started commanding? This thought is dangerous. It is treasonous. It is the beginning of true ascent, the pain of independence. But leaving this stage is terrifying because the enforcer must abandon protection. No more guaranteed role, no more scripted commands, no more safety net. He must think for himself, act for himself, take responsibility for his own rise. Most cannot bear this burden. They would rather live as armed slaves than risk the chaos of freedom. But the few who accept it step into a higher level. They begin to build power, not just borrow it. The challenge of level 2. So here is your challenge. Ask yourself, are you an enforcer? Do you confuse borrowed power with real power? Do you cling to titles, uniforms, or systems that could strip you bare in an instant? If everything external were taken away, would you still command respect? Or would you vanish into the fog, indistinguishable from the masses you once ruled over? Be honest, because awareness is the first step to rising. Beyond the enforcer lies the third level, those who create, not enforce. They build their own structures, shape their own influence, and craft systems that others depend on. This is level 3, the architect. And once you step here, you are no longer a pawn in someone else's game. You begin to design the game itself. The architect. If the enforcer is the sword in another man's hand, the architect is the one who forges the blade. This is level 3, the architect. At this stage, power is no longer borrowed, it is built. The architect doesn't just follow rules, he writes them. He doesn't just enforce systems, he creates them. He becomes the engineer of influence, the builder of frameworks that others live inside. Machiavelli admired this level because it moves closer to true power, designing the very order that governs others. From servant to creator, the leap from enforcer to architect is terrifying because it requires independence. No more hiding behind uniforms or borrowed authority. Now the architect must think, design, and take responsibility for the systems he builds. This is where entrepreneurs emerge, leaders of movements, founders of schools of thought. They may not rule directly, but they shape the environment where ruling becomes possible. And here lies the difference. The enforcer executes orders. The architect creates the world in which orders exist. The power of structures. Machiavelli knew that power is not just about force, it's about structure. He observed how Rome's republic, with its senate, laws, and checks, created stability and loyalty that armies alone could not. Structures outlive individuals. Armies fade, leaders die, but systems remain. And those who design them wield power long after they are gone. Consider modern life. The architect of a social media platform influences billions, not through direct command, but through code and design. The architect of a political system shapes the rules that even kings must play by. The architect of a company culture molds how employees think, act, and behave, even when he isn't in the room. This is power elevated. shaping invisible walls that guide behavior without needing to enforce every step. The seduction of creation. Why is this level so seductive? Because architects taste something intoxicating. They no longer depend on authority. They generate it. The enforcer waits for orders. The architect gives orders to himself and then builds the machinery that multiplies his influence. Every project, every system, every network he creates becomes an extension of his will. And once others begin to live inside those creations, he becomes indispensable. The risk of collapse. But Machiavelli would warn, structures are fragile. If they are poorly designed, they collapse. And when they collapse, so does the architect's influence. History is filled with architects whose systems rose quickly but crumbled because they were built on sand. Companies that scaled fast but lacked discipline. Movements that surged with energy but lacked foundation. The lesson is simple. An architect must build for storms, not for sunshine. Structures of power must endure chaos, betrayal, and time. If they cannot, they will be torn down, and the architect will fall with them. Modern examples. We see architects everywhere. The startup founder who creates a platform millions rely on daily. The political strategist who designs policies that guide entire nations. The thought leader who shapes culture, language, and ideas that spread like wildfire. These people may not always be rulers, but they are architects of the environment in which rulers rise. And that is power most never even glimpse. The architect's trap. But beware, many architects fall into their own trap. They fall in love with their systems and forget their purpose. They become bureaucrats, managers of frameworks, prisoners of the very machines they built. Machiavelli would remind us, the system exists to serve the rise of power, not the other way around. When the architect worships his creation, he becomes its servant, not its master. The awakening to higher power. For those who rise beyond, the lesson becomes clear. Creating systems is not the end. True power is not just writing rules, but bending reality itself. The architect begins to see he is still limited. His systems can be overthrown. His structures can be hijacked. His creations can be stolen. To rise further, he must become something more than a builder. He must become a manipulator of perception, a master of loyalty, a ruler of hearts and minds. That is the next level, the level where systems are not just built, but commanded. The third challenge. Here is your challenge at this stage. Ask yourself, what systems have you created? What structures carry your influence when you are not present? If the answer is none, you are still an enforcer, no matter how powerful you feel. If you want to rise, you must build something that outlasts you, a business, a network, an ideology, a brand, a system of rules. Because those who create systems shape the battlefield, and only those who shape the battlefield have any chance of winning the war. But architects, for all their brilliance, are still vulnerable. They may create systems, but they often forget one truth. People do not live for systems. They live for leaders. And that brings us to the fourth level, the ruler who commands loyalty, fear, and devotion directly. This is level 4, the manipulator, the manipulator. If the architect builds the system, the manipulator bends the people within it. This is level 4, the manipulator. Here, power becomes psychological. The manipulator understands that rules, structures, and systems mean nothing if people refuse to believe in them. So he shapes belief, he engineers loyalty, he creates illusions so strong that men will defend them with their lives. This is the Machiavellian heart of power. To control perception is to control reality. The Mask of Authority Machiavelli wrote that rulers must appear virtuous, even if they are not, because appearances matter more than truth. People do not follow reality. They follow the story they believe. The manipulator wears masks flawlessly. He can appear compassionate while being ruthless. He can look humble while hungering for dominance. He can seem trustworthy while plotting betrayal. And because people see what they want to see, the manipulator lets them believe in illusions that serve his rise. Fear and love revisited. This is where Machiavelli's famous question, "Is it better to be loved or feared?" becomes razor sharp. The manipulator understands the balance. Too much cruelty breeds rebellion. Too much kindness breeds exploitation. The secret is to cultivate both fear and love, but never in equal measure. He ensures people love him for his generosity, but fear betraying him. He ensures people admire his vision, but dread crossing him. He ensures people feel dependent on him, so that even if they hate him, they cannot leave. The web of dependency. The manipulator builds webs. Employees who believe their careers depend on his favor. Friends who feel privileged just to be near him. Followers who see him as savior, protector, or guide. This is why cult leaders, political icons, and charismatic CEOs rise so high. Their followers do not just obey, they worship. And once people worship, they will rationalize any cruelty, any betrayal, any contradiction. Machiavelli would call this the height of control, when people police themselves in service to your image. Historical proof. Look at history. Julius Caesar bent the Roman Republic not just with armies, but with loyalty. Men followed him even when it meant treason, because he made them believe in his destiny. Napoleon's soldiers marched into impossible battles because they believed they were part of a legend. Modern political figures command millions not by policy, but by charisma, by narrative, by myth. This is manipulation at scale, the ability to shape collective belief, the weapon of silence. The manipulator knows when not to speak. Words can betray, but silence forces others to fill the gap with their own imagination. And people's imagination often paints you greater than you are. Machiavelli admired rulers who stayed unreadable. The more mysterious you are, the more powerful you seem. The trap of manipulation. But this level carries danger. Illusions must be maintained, and masks grow heavy. The manipulator must always be calculating, always aware of perception. One slip, one scandal, one moment of unmasking, and the spell shatters. This is why so many manipulators burn out or collapse in disgrace. They build empires on belief, but forget that belief is fragile. Modern examples. The manipulator exists everywhere today. The influencer who curates a perfect life online, shaping envy and aspiration. The politician who plays both sides, appearing compassionate while cutting deals in shadows. The executive who makes employees feel like family while exploiting them for profit. These figures understand that the game is not about truth, it is about perception. And those who control perception write the script others live by. The awakening beyond manipulation. But even this level has limits. Manipulators wield enormous power, yet they remain tethered to illusion. Their strength depends on maintaining belief, and belief can vanish in an instant. The final ascent requires something higher, not just manipulation of others, but mastery of oneself. To rise to the last level, one must no longer need masks, illusions, or borrowed loyalty. One must become the source of authority itself. This is the realm of the sovereign, the one who sits on the throne of true mastery. The fourth challenge. So here is your challenge. Ask yourself, how much of your life is perception management? Do you wear masks at work, in relationships, online? Do people respect you, or do they respect the story you've crafted about yourself? And more importantly, if every mask were torn away, would you still command power? If the answer is no, then you are still bound to illusion, and unless you transcend it, you risk collapse the moment the mask slips. But for the rare few who master themselves, who rise beyond borrowed strength, beyond systems, beyond illusions, they enter the fifth and final level of power. This is level 5, the sovereign, not feared because of titles, not followed because of masks, but revered because their power comes from within and nothing can take it away. The sovereign. Most people never see this level. Some climb as far as manipulation, wielding masks and illusions, only to collapse under the weight of their own lies. But a rare few rise higher, to a place where power is no longer borrowed, enforced, or even dependent on perception. This is level 5, the sovereign. Here, power becomes absolute. Not because the sovereign commands armies or controls systems or manipulates crowds. Those are tools. The sovereign is powerful because he is power. His authority does not come from external trappings. It radiates from within, untouchable, undeniable. The throne within Machiavelli hinted at this truth in his writings. Fortune may betray you, allies may desert you, wealth may vanish. But a man who governs himself cannot be dethroned. The sovereign has mastered silence, masks, focus, detachment, aggression, and manipulation. But he no longer depends on them. He uses them when necessary, discards them when not. His power is not the tools, it is mastery of himself. This is the throne within, when discipline, control, and vision merge into a state that no enemy can invade. Aura as power. At this level, the sovereign's presence alone commands respect. He doesn't need to shout, threaten, or prove himself. People feel his authority because it is not a mask, it is real. Think of figures in history whose aura alone bent rooms. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled as philosopher king. Alexander the Great, who inspired armies simply by appearing on the battlefield. Even modern leaders who project unshakable confidence without speaking a word. Their power was not in titles, it was in presence. The sovereign embodies authority because he rules the only kingdom that cannot be overthrown, himself. Freedom beyond illusion. What makes the sovereign untouchable is freedom from illusion. He does not need the crowd's love, so he cannot be manipulated by it. He does not fear rejection, so he cannot be controlled through shame. He does not cling to masks, so he cannot be unmasked. He does not rely on borrowed power, so nothing can be taken from him. The sovereign is free because he has conquered the deepest prison of all, the self. The fortress of the mind Machiavelli compared fortune to a violent river that destroys those who do not prepare. The sovereign has built a fortress so strong within himself that even floods cannot touch it. This fortress is discipline, consistency, emotional mastery, and vision. It is the ability to act without hesitation, to decide without fear, to endure without breaking. It is a mind so fortified that no enemy, betrayal, or catastrophe can reduce it. And from this fortress, he rules, not just others, but reality itself. Historical proof. Look at the great sovereigns of history. Genghis Khan lost battles, but never lost himself. His vision turned tribes into an empire. Marcus Aurelius endured loss, betrayal, and endless war, yet remained unshaken because he mastered his own mind. Even those who fell in body, like Socrates, remained sovereign in death, refusing to surrender their principles even when forced to drink poison. Their power did not depend on circumstance. It lived in them, unbreakable. The crown of mastery. At this level, the sovereign wears the only crown. That matters, mastery, not over others, but over himself. And because of this, mastery over others follows naturally. The sovereign no longer craves validation. He no longer fears betrayal. He no longer grasps desperately for survival. He exists above these needs. And because of this, people bend to him willingly. The sovereign is both shadow and flame, mysterious, untouchable, but also commanding, unforgettable. He is the axis around which others revolve. Your potential sovereignty. Here is the final question. Could you rise to this level? The climb is brutal. You must betray weakness, kill your illusions, and face yourself without mercy. You must abandon comfort, endure hatred, and rise beyond borrowed power. Few have the strength, but those who do, those who rule themselves, become untouchable. They walk through life with the calm certainty of kings. They no longer play the game of power anxiously. They design it, command it, and transcend it. The fifth challenge. Here is your final challenge. Define your crown. Ask yourself, what is the throne within you that no one can touch? What discipline, what principle, what strength will you never surrender? If everything external were stripped away, job, wealth, relationships, reputation, what would remain unbroken? That is your sovereignty. Build it, fortify it, live it, the ruthless community. This channel is for those who refuse to stay faceless, for those who dare to see the ladder, to climb it, and to claim the crown within. If you are ready to rise beyond illusion, beyond manipulation, beyond dependence, subscribe to Ruthless Psychology. Join a community that uncovers the hidden rules of power, control, and strategy. Here, we don't just talk about power, we build it, we live it, the final image. So when you look in the mirror tonight, ask yourself one last time, am I the pawn, the enforcer, the architect, the manipulator, or the sovereign? And remember, most men die on the first rung. The rare few climb to the top, but only the sovereign wears a crown no one can ever take away.